You know, one thing that is not talked about a whole lot on the drug war, which I sincerely believe compounds our problem, that if you look at the people arrested for drugs, a large majority are minorities. And if you're likely to get put in prison for nonviolent use of drugs, it's way out of proportion to the population. And immediately I thought, well, that must be because minorities use more drugs. But you know, studying it is not true. You know, all groups of people of all races in this country use drugs essentially about the same. But there is a lot of discrimination in the courts. Also, I had over the years, and I've written about this, how I've changed my attitude about the use of the death penalty, especially at the federal level. I've come to the conclusion, at the federal level, we don't need a death penalty. They don't know how to do anything else, so I don't know how they can impose a death penalty on anybody. But the one problem is, whether it's the enforcement of the death penalty or the drug issues, poor people get a short shrift on that. They are not treated as well. So I think that we should be honest with ourselves on this issue, because there is, I think that's the last place where real discrimination exists. This other stuff that we're accused of so often of being discriminating against, and we need more affirmative action programs, I don't buy into that. But I really do think that in our court system there's some major problems still there. But what we need to do, though, of course, is to continue exactly what we have been doing, whether it's education or whether it's political, and to change the course of history, because this is what we're up against. It's not so easy. We're not dealing with a minor recession. We have to deal with it. We're dealing with about 100 years of perpetual and disintegration of what we're supposed to be all about, undermining our liberties. We have less liberties every single day. Our economy keeps getting weaker every single day. We expand our militant presence around the world. You'd think with us going broke, that we might say, well, why do we need another war? And here we are in Libya, another war. Did the war come from permission of the Congress through a declaration? No, it came from NATO and United Nations. We don't need any more of this. Gates in his retirement said that, he says, anybody who thinks we need another war needs their head examined. And you know, he's been involved in a lot of this stuff all along, but he's telling the truth there. We don't need another war. We need to be able to defend ourselves if somebody attacks us. But we also should understand how our foreign policy backfires on us, unintended consequences, and the blowback phenomena. Because if we continue as a nation to think that the only reason anybody would ever want to harm us and just commit a crime against us and kill Americans is because we're free and prosperous, I tell you, we can't win that argument. But I think more and more people are starting to realize that there's a lot more to it, because there's been good research on that. And you know, there's a lot of common sense out there yet too, because common sense, I think, would tell us that if any country has to put up with what we impose on other countries, that there will be some retaliation. You know, I think about Ronald Reagan in many different ways, because, you know, I was a supporter of his early on. And then of course, in the 80s, I wasn't happy with the budgets and the spending, and then had some criticism. But he, in the early 80s, when he sent the Marines into Lebanon, I was a critic. That was when I was first in Congress. Then I left in '84 and was out for 12 years, and then went back. But early in those years, when the Marines went into Lebanon, I remember going to the floor. There were 3 or 4 of us complaining about this. And I remember at that time, Barry Goldwater Sr. was very much on that same position. So he was considered hawkish, but he didn't think this made any sense, putting our Marines over there. But then the Marines were killed, and the Marines were taken out. Immediately after the Marines were taken out, the suicide terrorism ceased. And there were several, it wasn't as epidemic as it is now, but the attacks against us absolutely ceased. But Ronald Reagan had said he would never turn tail and run, and yet in a way that's essentially what he did. He didn't expand the war when that crisis hit. He came home and left it. And a lot of people complain, no, we got to expand the war, we got to kill them all. And I was anxious to see what he would do in his memoirs when he wrote about this, and he was very specific about it. And he even said, I said I wouldn't turn tail and run, but he says it finally came to me that the politics of that region are totally irrational. And there was no way to reconcile this, so he thought it was in the best interest of our people and for peace that he come home. And that's what he did. But he also said something that is not repeated quite so often. He said, if we would have been following a policy of neutrality and been more neutral at that particular time, he said those Marines would still be living. And you know, that is really sad, but it's courageous in one way that he was trying to send a message to us that there are times when we just have to be more cautious. Another memoir that I thought was interesting to look at, and that was Robert McNamara. I mean, I was in the military from 63 to 68, and that was pretty much at the height of the Cold War. It was pretty bad times then. And McNamara was the chief cheerleader and the orchestrator and the building up of the troops and doing all this. So it was interesting to see that, you know, he really did come around to saying, he didn't say that how bad it really wasn't as bad as what some of us thought, but he at least recognized that it was absolutely turned out to be bad policy. And when he was being interviewed for his book, a reporter asked him, he says, does that mean then you should apologize? Should you apologize for what you did? And he said, you know, he says, what good is an apology? He says, the only thing that counts is you recognize your mistakes and change your policy. And I think that's what we need to do today. Economically, as candidates, we're asked all the time, what are you going to do the first day to create jobs? Well, the first day I could do is I could maybe bring the troops home, and I'd like to get rid of some jobs in the EPA and a few other places. But no, you're not going to have a wand and one day have jobs, but you do have to change the atmosphere. You have to change the attitude. You have to change the understanding, which requires doing more of what we're doing here and getting people to understand the difference. See, I don't believe you can have growth until you understand why we have a depression. And you don't know how you have why you have a depression until you know why there was an artificial boom. And you don't know how you had an artificial boom unless you know something about the Federal Reserve and artificially low interest rates and an inflated currency. So you have to know all these things in order to say, how do you get growth? And then when you understand that that business cycle is caused by artificially low interest rates, accumulation of a huge amount of debt, and that it's the debt burden that is the big problem. You can't get growth when the debt is just a heavy weight on us. And sometimes I think of it like a swimmer. You know, if the swimmer is going downstream and he's doing quite well and a few weights are put on him, you know, he can probably manage. But what if he comes to the end of the stream and he can't be washed over the waterfall and he has to turn around and swim upstream? So he's swimming upstream. It's very difficult, and he has these weights. He has the regulations and taxes and all the burdens and the mistakes, and he's struggling to go upstream. And they say, well, what can we do to help him? Well, what we need to do is put more weights on his back, you know, and that's supposed to help, and that's what we've been doing. So we recognize that there's been too much spending, too much borrowing, too much printing press money, and too much inflation, and that's what we did. We ended up spending, borrowing, taxing, regulating, and then we wonder why there aren't any more jobs. What are we going to do? So we have to understand that. So the best thing to do is get rid of the weights, and getting rid of the weights mean get the burden of these regulations and taxes off our back and get out of the way and allow people to get back to work. But you do have to liquidate the debt. If you're an individual and you get into trouble, or if you have a small business and you can't get credit and you're not making it, and you want to get growth back into your life, your personal life or your business life, you have to get rid of the burden of debt. Now, if you're an individual, the banks are bearing down on you. You can't get more credit, and you're not earning enough. So you have to back off. You might have to liquidate debt. Some people have to declare bankruptcy. Others will work harder, take 2 jobs, cut the spending. If they have 3 cars, they have to go down to 1. But they have to get rid of the debt in order to have economic growth again. A country should do the same thing, but the political pressure is so heavy, so powerful, that the politicians can't say, you mean we're not supposed to do anything? We're supposed to allow these guys to go bankrupt? Yes, those guys on Wall Street should have gone bankrupt, and they shouldn't have been bailed out. You know, this whole idea of allowing to go bankruptcy means that we should do a lot less, and that's what we did in 1921, and that was a benefit. In medicine, there's a similar condition like this, because sometimes patients will come in. I hope it's not as much as it used to be, but patients would come in, and a child would have a cold and a viral infection, and the best thing would be, you know, conservative treatment and no antibiotics. But the parents would come in and put tremendous pressure on the doctor, and the doctor wants to say, well, I'm doing something. And then they gave too much antibiotics. And in a way, this is the way it is in economics. They come in and you have to do things, do more to satisfy the people. The people want something done. That's what politicians are for. No, I think politicians are should be there to do a lot less and let the people do what they want. That's what we need. But we're facing this crisis. A lot of people ask me, when do I think this is going to come to a head? I don't know exactly when, but I do not believe we can continue to do what we're doing. I believe the foundation of our economic system, the foundation that on which our foreign policy is built, and the foundation on which our personal liberties have been built, it is totally eroded, and this thing can come crashing down on our heads any time. But what we have to do is be prepared for that. I always argue that we should work for the transition and try to work our way out of it. But if that doesn't happen, then there has to be rebuilding. We have to restate the principles we believe in. And we're going to have that opportunity. The opportunity is staring us in the face right now. I think it's one of the reasons why our numbers are growing. I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people, and there'll probably be some in this audience, they don't come from just so-called conservative Republican circles. They come from conservative Republican circles. They come from independents. They come from Democrats. They come from people who have been sick and tired of what's happening, and they're listening now, and they're deciding it's time we restate our conviction that freedom is a lot better than tyranny. That is what we have to do.